Number A. Wrong turn into a human's room, altered the princess's destiny. Princess Zara Lynn of the Ethereal Dominion had never seen anything quite so chaotic in her 300 years of existence. The massive diplomatic station floating in neutral space was a maze of corridors, each designed to accommodate the various alien species that called this sector of the galaxy home. Her elegant four-armed frame moved gracefully through the halls, her crystalline skin catching the artificial light as she searched desperately for Conference Room Epsilon 7. The peace talks between her people and the Corvani Empire were set to begin in mere minutes. And as the youngest member of the ethereal royal family, she could not afford to be late. Her father, Emperor Veltar, had already questioned her readiness for diplomatic service. Being tardy would only confirm his doubts about her capabilities. The corridor split into 3 directions, and the translation systems flickered unreliably. The signs meant nothing to her now. In her panic, she chose the middle path, her flowing ceremonial robes rustling as she quickened her pace. The hallway seemed different here, somehow smaller and more cramped than the others. The walls were made of some strange metallic substance rather than the organic biomaterial used in most of the station. She pressed her palm against what appeared to be a door control panel, expecting it to lead to another corridor. Instead, the door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a room that made her freeze in absolute bewilderment. The space was tiny compared to the grand chambers she was accustomed to. Strange, rectangular objects lined shelves along the walls, their spines marked with symbols in an unfamiliar script. A small workstation sat in one corner, covered with mechanical devices that seemed primitive, yet somehow purposeful. But what truly caught her attention was the figure hunched over a desk in the center of the room. It was a human. She had heard of them, of course. The newest species to achieve interstellar travel, barely 2 centuries into their space age. They were considered something of a curiosity among the galactic community, young, aggressive, and unpredictable. Most diplomats preferred to avoid them when possible. The human looked up as she entered, and she found herself staring into 2 small, round eyes, set in a pale face, framed by dark hair. Unlike her people's forearms, he possessed only 2, and his movements seemed almost clumsy as he stood quickly, nearly knocking over a container of what appeared to be some kind of dark liquid. "Oh, I'm sorry, I think you've got the wrong room," he said, his voice carrying a strange accent through the universal translator. "Are you looking for the diplomatic wing? It's back down the main corridor. Take a left at the junction, then follow the blue markers." Zara Lynn found herself unable to speak for a moment. She had expected the human to bow, or at least show some recognition of her status. The jewelry adorning her arms and the formal robes she wore clearly marked her as nobility. Yet this creature simply stood there, offering directions as if she were any common traveler. Yes, she finally managed, though something made her hesitate in the doorway. "What is this place?" The human glanced around his small domain with what she interpreted as embarrassment. "My quarters. I know it's not much compared to the diplomatic suites. I'm just a researcher here, studying interspecies communication patterns and linguistic evolution. The name's Marcus Chen. By the way." He extended one of his 2 hands toward her, and after a moment of confusion, she realized he expected her to grasp it with one of her own. The gesture was foreign to her people, but something about his earnest expression made her comply. His skin was warm, much warmer than her own crystalline flesh, and surprisingly soft despite the calluses she could feel on his fingertips. "Princess Zara Lynn of the Ethereal Dominion," she replied formally. Marcus's eyes widened slightly. "Princess? Oh no. I'm so sorry. I should have recognized. I should have bowed or something. Right? I'm still learning the protocols for different species." His obvious discomfort was strangely endearing. Unlike the carefully measured responses she received from other diplomats, his reaction seemed genuine. "There is no need for ceremony," she found herself saying, though protocol demanded otherwise. "You mentioned linguistic research?" "Yes. Actually, that's why I'm stuck in this tiny room instead of attending the talks. I'm documenting how different species adapt their communication when interacting with humans. We're still so new to all this." He gestured to the mechanical devices on his desk. "Most of the other species have been working together for millennia. Humans have been part of galactic society for less than 50 years. Zara Lynn stepped further into the room, drawn by his enthusiasm. The rectangular objects on the shelves, she realized, were books. Physical repositories of information, primitive compared to the crystal matrices her people used. Yet there was something appealing about their tangible nature. "Your people still use physical texts?" she asked, running one of her fingers along the spine of a book titled Comparative Xenolinguistics. "Some of us do. I know it's old-fashioned, but there's something about the physical act of turning pages that helps me think. Plus, they don't require power or risk data corruption." Marcus moved to stand beside her, pulling a book from the shelf. "This one's about how humans learn to interpret emotional subtext in Zephyrian mathematical equations." As he opened the book, Zara Lynn caught sight of handwritten notes covering the margins. The symbols were incomprehensible to her, but the obvious care and attention in their formation spoke of dedication. "You wrote these annotations yourself?" "Every one. I've been studying interspecies communication since before first contact. It's fascinating how much meaning can be lost or gained in translation." He paused, seeming to study her expression. "For instance, right now I can tell you're concerned about something, but I'm not sure if it's because you're late for something important, or if my presence is somehow inappropriate." His perception surprised her. Most beings, even those of her own species, had difficulty reading ethereal expressions. "I am expected at the peace conference. These talks are crucial for preventing war between my people and the Corvani Empire." Marcus nodded gravely. "The territorial disputes over the Nexus systems. I've been following the situation. Both sides have legitimate claims, but the communication breakdown has been the real problem, hasn't it?" Zara Lynn stared at him in amazement. Here was this young human, barely past what her people would consider childhood, demonstrating a grasp of the situation that many senior diplomats lacked. "You understand the core issue. It's what I do. Language isn't just about words. It's about intent and cultural context. The Corvani communicate through hierarchical imperatives, while your people favor collaborative consensus. When the Corvani say, 'We require access,' they mean, 'We would like to negotiate terms.' But the ethereal translation matrix interprets it as, 'We demand surrender.'" The accuracy of his assessment left her speechless. Months of failed negotiations suddenly made sense through this new lens. "How do you know this?" Marcus gestured to his cluttered workspace. "I've been analyzing the transcripts of every failed negotiation session. The patterns are obvious once you account for cultural translation, rather than just linguistic conversion." He paused, then asked carefully, "Princess, may I ask you something? Why does your father believe these talks will fail?" The question struck her like a bolt of energy. Emperor Veltar had indeed expressed pessimism about the negotiations, but she had assumed it was due to Corvani aggression, not communication failures. He believes the Corvani cannot be trusted to honor any agreement. But that's based on previous negotiations where the communication errors made them appear dishonest. Marcus said gently, "What if there was a way to bypass those errors entirely?" Before Zara Lynn could respond, her personal communicator chimed urgently. The conference was about to begin, and her absence had been noted. She looked toward the door, then back at this remarkable human who had shown her an entirely new perspective in the span of a few minutes. "I must go," she said reluctantly. "Of course. Good luck with the negotiations, Princess." As she reached the door, she turned back. "Marcus Chen, would you be willing to assist in these talks? Your insights could prevent a war." He looked genuinely surprised. "I'm just a researcher. I don't have any diplomatic authority." "Neither did I until today," she replied with a smile that was becoming more natural. "Sometimes the most important discoveries happen by accident." As she hurried through the corridors toward her destiny, Princess Zara Lynn carried with her not just directions to the conference room, but the beginning of an idea that would change the course of galactic history. Behind her, Marcus Chen stood in his small room, staring at the door and wondering if he had just witnessed something far more significant than a wrong turn. The peace talks awaited, but now they held possibilities that neither side had imagined. The grand conference chamber of Diplomatic Station Harmony buzzed with tension so thick it could be tasted in the recycled air. Princess Zara Lynn took her place at the curved table, her father's stern gaze following her every movement. Emperor Veltar's crystalline features showed no emotion, but she could read the disappointment in the subtle shift of his posture. Being late to such crucial negotiations was unforgivable. Across the table, the Corvani delegation arranged themselves in their characteristic military formation. Admiral Thexmore, their chief negotiator, was an imposing figure even by Corvani standards. His chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the chamber lights, and his compound eyes reflected the room in 1,000 different angles. The translator devices struggled with the clicking and chittering sounds that comprised Corvani speech. "We shall begin with territorial boundaries in the Nexus 7 system," announced Mediator Kell, a representative of the Neutral Galactic Arbitration Council. The Corvani Empire claims mining rights, based on prior exploration, while the Ethereal Dominion asserts cultivation privileges through ecological partnership with local species. Admiral Thexmore's mandibles clicked rapidly. Through the translator, his words came out as sharp demands. The territory belongs to those strong enough to claim it. The ethereal weakness will not be tolerated in systems of strategic importance. Emperor Veltar's forearms spread in what humans might mistake for a welcoming gesture, but Zara Lynn recognized as a defensive posture. The Corvani Empire speaks of strength, yet they would destroy entire ecosystems for temporary resource gain. This demonstrates short-sighted foolishness, not wisdom. The familiar pattern began immediately. Each side's words were being filtered through translation matrices that converted not just language, but cultural meaning. What the Corvani intended as statements of capability came across as threats. What the ethereals meant as expressions of concern sounded like condescension. Zara Lynn watched the exchange with new understanding, Marcus Chen's insights echoing in her mind. The Corvani admiral wasn't threatening war. He was trying to establish his people's credentials as reliable partners. Her father wasn't being dismissive. He was expressing genuine concern about environmental stewardship. "If I may," she interrupted, surprising everyone in the room. Junior royalty rarely spoke in such formal settings. "Admiral Thexmore, when you speak of strength, you refer to your people's proven ability to maintain and defend territorial claims. Correct?" The admiral's compound eyes focused on her with sharp attention. "Yes, Princess. The Corvani protect what is ours. And father," she continued, turning to Emperor Veltar, "your concerns about short-sightedness relate to ensuring long-term sustainability of resource extraction, preserving the systems for future generations." Her father's confusion was evident, but he nodded. The Nexus systems contain delicate ecological networks that took millennia to establish. Zara Lynn felt a surge of excitement as the pieces fell into place. "Then, perhaps we are discussing the same goals through different approaches. Admiral, would the Corvani be interested in extraction methods that could continue indefinitely without depleting the systems? Indefinite resource access would be acceptable," the admiral replied, his mandibles moving more slowly, as he considered her words. "And father, if the Corvani military presence could guarantee protection against resource pirates and unauthorized exploitation, would this address our security concerns?" Emperor Veltar's posture shifted slightly. Protection of the systems is indeed a primary consideration. Mediator Kell looked between the two sides with obvious bewilderment. In his centuries of diplomatic service, he had never seen such rapid progress in previously deadlocked negotiations. "Princess Zara Lynn, are you suggesting a joint custody arrangement?" Before she could respond, her personal communicator chimed with an urgent message. Marcus Chen was requesting permission to observe the negotiations. More specifically, he was offering his services as a cultural translation consultant. "Mediator Kell," she said, inspired by sudden conviction, "I would like to request a brief recess. There is an expert I believe could assist in refining our communication protocols." Admiral Thexmore's mandibles clicked with what she was beginning to recognize as curiosity rather than aggression. "What manner of expert?" "A human specialist in interspecies communication," she replied, Immediately feeling the shift in the room's atmosphere, Emperor Veltar's forearms crossed in a gesture of clear disapproval. Zaralin, this is neither the time nor place for experimenting with untested approaches. These negotiations are too important for amateur assistants. With respect, Father. Our current approach has failed 17 times over the past 2 years. Perhaps it is time to consider alternatives. Mediator Kell consulted his protocols. The presence of additional advisors is permitted if both primary parties agree. Admiral Thexmore? Mediator Kell. The Corvani leader was quiet for a long moment, his compound eyes reflecting the chamber lights as he considered. The humans are young, but they have impressed many with their rapid adaptation to galactic society. If this human possesses insights that could prevent war, I am willing to listen. 10 minutes later, Marcus Chen entered the conference chamber carrying a simple data pad and looking distinctly nervous. His casual researcher attire contrasted sharply with the formal robes and ceremonial armor worn by the other participants. Zaralin noticed how small he appeared compared to the imposing figures around the table, yet there was something in his bearing that suggested quiet confidence. "Thank you for this opportunity," he said, inclining his head to each delegation. "I've spent the past few minutes reviewing the transcripts of your previous negotiations. If I may, I'd like to demonstrate something." He activated his data pad, and a holographic display appeared above the table showing 2 columns of text. "This is from your last session. On the left, we have Admiral Thexmore's statement, as recorded by the Corvani translation matrix. On the right, the same statement, as processed by the ethereal system. The Corvani text read, "Our forces maintain territorial integrity through demonstrated capability and resource optimization protocols." The ethereal translation showed, "Our armies will seize the territory through military force and strip it of all valuable materials." A stunned silence filled the chamber. Admiral Thexmore's mandibles clicked rapidly, and what Zaralin now understood was agitation, not aggression. "This is not what I said." "No, it isn't," Marcus agreed. "Your actual meaning was much closer to, our people have proven we can responsibly govern territory and make efficient use of resources." The translation matrix converted your formal military terminology into what it pay, interpreted as threats because it lacks cultural context. He switched to another example. "Emperor Veltar, here's one of your statements from the same session." The ethereal text read, "Harmonious development requires patient cultivation of natural cycles and respectful integration with existing life forms." The Corvani translation showed, "We will slowly take control of the area and force all other species to submit to our rules." Emperor Veltar's crystalline features shifted through several colors, indicating shock. "That is completely contrary to my intended meaning." "Exactly," Marcus said. "Your philosophical approach to environmental stewardship was interpreted through a Corvani cultural filter that emphasizes hierarchy and control. The essence of your message was lost." Mediator Kell leaned forward with intense interest. "Are you saying that most of our translation failures stem from cultural rather than linguistic errors?" "More than that," Marcus replied, warming to his subject. "I believe both sides actually want the same things, but they're expressing those desires through completely different cultural frameworks. Watch this." He manipulated his data pad, and new text appeared. "Admiral Thexmore, if you were to express your people's goals for the Nexus systems using ethereal cultural concepts, it might sound like this. The Corvani seek to become guardians of these systems, ensuring their protection and sustainable use for the benefit of all galactic citizens, while honoring our ancestral duty to defend what we cherish." The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. "That is surprisingly accurate. And Emperor Veltar, your goals expressed through Corvani cultural concepts might be, the ethereal dominion demands strategic control of these systems to implement superior resource management protocols that will maximize long-term territorial value while eliminating inefficient exploitation by unqualified forces. The core meaning is preserved," the Emperor admitted, "though the expression is rather more forceful than our usual manner." Marcus smiled, and Zaralyn found herself appreciating the warmth in his expression. That's the beauty of cultural translation. You're not changing what you want to say, just finding ways to say it that the other side can truly understand. Admiral Thexmore leaned forward, his massive form casting shadows across the table. Human Marcus Chen, can you translate a proposal for us? I can try. The Admiral's mandibles moved as he spoke in rapid Corvani directly to his translation device. The standard translation came through as, Corvani forces will claim the Nexus 7 system and implement resource extraction protocols. Ethereal interference will not be tolerated. Marcus listened to the original Corvani audio, then consulted his datapad. After a moment, he offered an alternative. The Corvani Empire proposes to accept stewardship responsibility for the Nexus 7 system, implementing resource management practices designed for long-term sustainability. We would welcome ethereal expertise in developing protocols that honor the ecological balance while meeting legitimate resource needs. That, said Admiral Thexmore with obvious satisfaction, is exactly what I meant to say. Emperor Veltar's forearms uncrossed for the first time since the session began. Admiral, if that is truly your proposal, then perhaps we have been negotiating based on fundamental misunderstandings. As the session continued with Marcus providing cultural translation, Zaralyn watched something remarkable unfold. Points of contention that had seemed insurmountable began to reveal themselves as simple communication failures. Both sides discovered they shared concerns about resource sustainability, territorial security, and economic stability. The Corvani military efficiency and ethereal environmental expertise weren't competing philosophies, but complementary approaches to the same challenges. Hours passed as if they were minutes. By the end of the session, the framework for an unprecedented cooperation agreement had emerged. The Corvani would provide security and administrative structure for the Nexus systems, while the Ethereals would guide environmental policies and sustainable development practices. Both sides would share in the benefits, and both would bear responsibility for the system's long-term welfare. As the formal session concluded, Admiral Thexmore approached Marcus directly. Human researcher, your insights have prevented a war that would have cost millions of lives. How can such wisdom come from so young a species? Marcus looked slightly embarrassed by the praise. Maybe it's because we're outsiders. Sometimes it takes fresh eyes to see solutions that have been there all along. Emperor Veltar joined them. His attitude toward both Marcus and his daughter noticeably changed. Princess Zaralyn, your instinct to seek this assistance showed wisdom beyond your years. Marcus Chen, the ethereal dominion owes you a debt that cannot easily be repaid. Just knowing that peace is possible is payment enough, Marcus replied. As the various delegations filed out of the chamber, Zaralyn found herself walking beside Marcus toward the exit. You did something extraordinary today, she told him. We all did, he corrected. I just helped everyone understand what they were really trying to say to each other. Is this what humans do? She asked curiously. Find solutions that others miss? Marcus considered the question seriously. I think maybe we just ask different questions. When everyone else was trying to figure out who was right and who was wrong, I wondered if maybe both sides were right and just talking past each other. As they reached the corridor where they would part ways, Zaralyn felt reluctant to end their conversation. The day had been full of revelations. Not just about communication and diplomacy, but about the remarkable perspective that this young human brought to seemingly impossible problems. Marcus, she said impulsively, would you be interested in staying on as a cultural advisor? These negotiations were just the beginning. There will be implementation meetings, regular reviews, and undoubtedly new challenges as our peoples learn to work together. His eyes lit up with enthusiasm. You mean it? I could help establish permanent communication protocols? More than that, she replied, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. I think you could help change how the entire galactic community communicates with each other. This problem exists everywhere, doesn't it? Not just between Corvani and Ethereals. Marcus nodded slowly. Every species approaches communication differently. Most of the conflicts I've studied stem from the same kinds of misunderstandings we resolve today. Then, perhaps, Princess Zaralyn said, feeling the weight of destiny settling around them, it is time for someone to do something about it. As they stood in the corridor outside the conference chamber, both of them sensed that this moment represented far more than the end of successful negotiations. It was the beginning of something that could reshape the galaxy itself, starting with a wrong turn that had led to exactly the right place. 6 months after the historic Nexus Accords were signed, Princess Zaralyn stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed Harmony Institute, watching ships from dozens of different species dock at the massive orbital facility. What had begun as a simple research station had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic history. A center dedicated entirely to improving interspecies communication and preventing conflicts through understanding. Marcus Chen had been right about the scope of the problem. Once word spread about the breakthrough in Corvani ethereal relations, requests for assistance began pouring in from across the galaxy. The Zephyrian-Andorian trade disputes, the territorial confusion between the crystalline collective and the gas giant nomads, the religious misunderstandings that had nearly led to war between the thought weavers and the silent builders. Every conflict, when examined closely, revealed the same underlying issue. Species talking past each other, rather than to each other. The morning briefings are becoming impossible to manage, Marcus said as he joined her at the observation window. His casual research attire had been replaced by a more formal outfit befitting his new role as Director of Cultural Translation, though he still carried the same battered datapad that had started it all. We have 17 new requests for mediation, 6 requests for permanent cultural advisors, and 3 different species asking if we can help them understand humans better. Zaralyn smiled at the irony. The mysterious humans continue to puzzle the galaxy, says the princess whose people spent 3 centuries perfecting the art of crystalline empathy, yet couldn't figure out that the Corvani were trying to be helpful. Marcus replied with the easy humor that had developed between them over months of working together. Their partnership had surprised everyone, including themselves. Where Zaralyn brought diplomatic training and natural empathy, Marcus contributed analytical insight and fresh perspectives. Together, they had developed communication protocols that were being adopted throughout the galactic community. The Chen Zaralyn method was already being taught in diplomatic schools across dozens of worlds. The Thought Weaver delegation has arrived, announced their assistant, a young Corvani named Kixtal, who had volunteered to learn human-style communication techniques. They are requesting immediate audience regarding the silent builder situation. Marcus sighed. The religious conflict. That's going to be a tough one. The Thought Weavers believe communication itself is sacred, while the silent builders see unnecessary words as spiritual pollution, which means they're both trying to be respectful to each other in ways that the other side interprets as disrespectful, Zaralyn observed. It's fascinating how often good intentions create the worst misunderstandings. They made their way to the main conference facility, now equipped with the most advanced translation equipment in the galaxy. But the real innovation wasn't technological. It was methodological. Instead of trying to create perfect universal translators, they had developed systems that preserved cultural context and emotional subtext. The result was communication that was less precise linguistically, but far more accurate in meaning. The Thought Weaver delegation was impressive to behold. Their tall, ethereal forms seemed to shimmer with barely contained energy, and their voices resonated with harmonic overtones that made their words feel like music. Their leader, harmony singer Velnessa, greeted them with elaborate verbal flourishes that took nearly 5 minutes to complete. Honored facilitators of understanding, bridge builders between disparate minds, we come before you in hope and desperation, seeking wisdom to heal the growing rift between our people and the silent builders, whose wisdom we respect despite our current inability to comprehend their methods of spiritual expression. Marcus caught Zaralyn's eye and she nodded. They had learned to work together seamlessly, each taking the lead based on which species they could better understand. Harmony singer, Zaralyn replied, matching the Thought Weaver's formal speech patterns. We are honored by your presence and grateful for your trust in seeking peaceful resolution to this sacred challenge. Once the proper courtesies had been observed, they were able to get to the heart of the matter. The silent builders, in their effort to be respectful of Thoughtweaver space, had stopped communicating entirely when their ships encountered Thoughtweaver vessels. The Thoughtweavers, interpreting this silence as contempt for their culture, had begun composing increasingly elaborate greetings to try to provoke some response. The Silent Builders, overwhelmed by what they saw as spiritual noise pollution, had started avoiding Thoughtweaver territories altogether. So the Thoughtweavers are trying to be more communicative to show respect, Marcus summarized after reviewing the reports, while the Silent Builders are trying to be less communicative to show respect. And both groups are interpreting the other side's respectful behavior as disrespectful of God. Precisely the pattern we've seen so many times, Zaralyn agreed. Two groups trying to honor each other's values while accidentally violating them. The solution, when they found it, was elegant in its simplicity. They developed a protocol where Thoughtweaver ships would transmit a single, carefully composed greeting that acknowledged the Silent Builders' preference for meaningful communication over elaborate display. The Silent Builders, in turn, would respond with a brief signal that conveyed gratitude for the respect shown to their traditions. Both sides got what they needed. The Thoughtweavers could express their nature through words, while the Silent Builders could honor their values through restraint. But as they worked through the details, something unexpected happened. Harmony singer Velnessa began asking questions about human communication methods, particularly about the concept of comfortable silence that Marcus had mentioned in passing. Your people can simply not speak, and this does not indicate hostility or disrespect? She asked with obvious fascination. Sometimes the most meaningful communication happens without words, Marcus explained. Humans call it companionable silence. You're together, you're comfortable, but you don't need to fill every moment with conversation. And this is considered positive among humans? Very much so. It usually indicates trust and understanding between people. Zaralyn watched the Harmony singer's expression transform as this concept took hold. You're thinking that perhaps there's value in the Silent Builders' approach that goes beyond simple cultural difference. I am beginning to wonder, Velnessa admitted, if our emphasis on constant communication might sometimes prevent deeper understanding. There is wisdom in what the Silent Builders practice. This was the moment that elevated their work beyond simple conflict resolution. They weren't just helping species tolerate each other's differences. They were helping them learn from those differences. The Thoughtweavers began incorporating periods of contemplative silence into their ceremonies, while the Silent Builders started using carefully chosen words at specific moments to enhance their spiritual practices. News of this breakthrough spread rapidly through the galactic communication networks. Species that had never considered learning from each other's approaches began requesting cultural exchange programs. The Corvani military efficiency methods were being adapted by peaceful agricultural societies to improve crop management. The ethereal consensus-building techniques were helping hierarchical species develop more inclusive decision-making processes. We've created something bigger than we intended, Marcus observed during one of their evening planning sessions. The Harmony Institute now operated around the clock, with representatives from over 40 species working to develop new communication protocols and conflict resolution methods. Have we? Zaralyn asked thoughtfully. Or did we simply uncover something that was always there, waiting to be discovered? They were standing again in the observation deck, watching the constant flow of ships arriving and departing. The diversity was stunning. Sleek ethereal vessels that seemed grown rather than built. Angular Corvani warships that somehow managed to look both threatening and protective. Mysterious Silent Builder craft that appeared as floating geometric puzzles, and dozens of other designs representing the incredible variety of galactic civilization. Sometimes I think about that day when you took the wrong turn, Marcus said. What would have happened if you'd found the right conference room instead? The negotiations would have failed, Zaralyn replied without hesitation. My father and Admiral Thex Moore would have said all the same things they'd said in previous sessions, with all the same translation errors, and we would have been preparing for war instead of planning cultural exchange programs. But that's not what I meant, Marcus said gently. I meant, what would have happened to us? The question hung in the air between them, carrying implications that neither had directly addressed, despite the months they had worked together. Their partnership had evolved beyond professional collaboration into something deeper. Though neither had been certain how to navigate the complexity of an interspecies relationship, I think, Zaralin said carefully, that we would have missed discovering something remarkable about what's possible when different perspectives combine. Professional perspectives, Marcus clarified, though his tone suggested he understood her meaning perfectly. Of course, she agreed, then added with a smile that had become precious to him. Though I have noticed that our most successful communication protocols seem to work on multiple levels. Before Marcus could respond, Kixtal's voice came through the communication system. Princess. Director Chen. We have an urgent request from the Galactic Council. The Nexus Systems project has been so successful that they're asking if we can develop similar cooperation frameworks for the entire Outer Rim territory disputes. They looked at each other, both understanding the magnitude of what was being requested. The Outer Rim contained hundreds of contested systems and dozens of competing claims. If their methods could resolve those conflicts, that would affect trade routes for half the galaxy, Marcus said slowly. It would also establish the Harmony Institute as the primary conflict resolution center for galactic civilization, Zaralin added. Are we ready for that level of responsibility? Zaralin considered the question seriously. 6 months ago, she had been a junior princess taking wrong turns on her way to minor diplomatic meetings. Marcus had been a researcher studying communication patterns from his tiny quarters. Now they were being asked to reshape how an entire galaxy resolved its differences. No one is ever ready for something like this, she said finally. But maybe that's exactly why we can do it. We came to this work without preconceptions about what was possible. Marcus nodded, his expression showing the same mixture of excitement and determination that had led him to accept her invitation all those months ago. Besides, we have something that most galactic institutions lack, which is, we know that the most important discoveries often happen by accident. When someone takes a wrong turn and finds exactly what they didn't know they were looking for. As they prepared to respond to the Galactic Council's request, both of them understood that they were about to embark on something that would define not just their careers, but the future of interspecies relations throughout the galaxy. The wrong turn that had brought them together had led to more than just preventing a single war. It had revealed a path toward a galaxy where differences were seen not as sources of conflict, but as opportunities for growth and understanding. Princess Zaralin of the Ethereal Dominion and Marcus Chen of Earth stood together at the observation deck of the Harmony Institute, watching the ships of dozens of species arrive and depart in peaceful cooperation, and knew that sometimes the best destinations are the ones you never intended to find. Their work was far from over. If anything, it was just beginning. But they had proven that, with patience, understanding, and the courage to see problems from new angles, even the most intractable conflicts could be resolved. The galaxy was vast and full of differences, but those differences no longer had to be sources of division. They had learned to turn wrong turns into right directions, and in doing so, they had changed the destiny of not just a princess and a researcher, but of galactic civilization itself. The future stretched ahead of them, full of challenges and possibilities, and they were ready to face it together.